everyone. Today we have our another new episode and we will discuss on the cognitive science of AGI. We have our world famous speaker, Mr. David Smith and Mr. Eric. First, I would like to give chance Mr. David Smith.
Well, Sharif, thank you so much for this topic today. You've combined two very interesting topics together as we look at where the future of artificial intelligence is going and how we begin to look at it from the concept of the human being and its mind and brain and what we want to do is that uh, AGI or artificial general intelligence is an agent that can understand or learn any intellectual task that a human being or animal can. And it has been also defined as an autonomous system that surpasses human capabilities at the majority of economically viable work. And so there's a lot of work's beginning to go into it. Some of the other things that artificial general intelligence has been called is also strong AI or full AI. So it's been one that we see working through quite a bit of the ways that we can work and live together as we look at the artificial general intelligence. And this term actually started back up in 2008 that made AGI a common buzzword for superhuman intelligence. So that's kind of where we started to get here. Now, the cognitive science portion of AGI to me is what makes it very interesting because back when I was an executive at the MCC consortia, we had an artificial intelligence program. And one of the uh, centerpieces of that artificial intelligence program was a researcher named Doug Lynette. And Doug pioneered the concept of AI when he was at Stanford with a approach that he called common sense intelligence. And what he wanted to do was create an AI system that could have common sense. You know, for example, if the sidewalk was wet, what could be the numerous things that could make the sidewalk wet, and begin to focus back into those. Um, and so that was part of his view of it. But as you begin to put more and more into it, you begin to see that the role of cognitive science really is one that was in a sense before artificial intelligence was artificial intelligence. And the real question with cognitive science is, can AI really benefit from the research in neuroscience? And also, as we begin to understand AI more and more, can neuroscience benefit as well? Because many of the people developing advanced artificial intelligence systems really want to understand that how the human mind works and what are the reasonable limits that a human mind can be used in a working definition of artificial general intelligence. And we're seeing really strong enhancements between them where we're trying to see, can AI become sapient like the researcher at Google had claimed earlier. But by diving deeper into the neuroscience and looking at the more hidden parts of how humans make decisions, how humans look at what's called a wide area view of technology and use that as part of the human making process, where much AI uses a much narrower filter, much narrower view. And one of the leading things as we look at AI, particularly generative AI, is the use of large scale learning programs. And we're getting these larger and larger, and that begins to set even more the foundation for the cognitive science part of AGI. But again, what we're trying to see is how closely, and if it should be closely, should the neuroscience of the human brain, should the neuroscience of the human nervous system and its autonomous process, how can those be brought to bear within the realms of artificial intelligence, and particularly as AI continues the march towards AGI? And Sharif, that might be a good first introduction.
Thank you. Now I request Mr. Eric.
So, the way we look at brains and cognitive science is changing all the time. One of the challenges to think of the brain not as one thing, but as a bunch of different processes, algorithms, systems, motivations. Like when we come up with a decision, we're looking at it often multiple times and correcting. For example, when we see somebody, before we even make a picture of it, our brain is making decisions about trustworthy, a threat, surprise. So part of our information goes to our brain right away. And then later we get this this visual picture, and we update our vision of that. So the idea is we're getting lots of different sensory information. Parts of our brain are acting on it differently and putting it together. And even because of that, the order that we get information makes a difference to the decisions we come up with. We can take the same pieces of information, scramble it, give it to different people, and the consensus of what that means changes. So, part of this idea is, AGI is just doing what brains do, is a big topic in itself, because our brains are that, and they're plastic, and they change, they evolve based on what they need to do. So they use computing power based on what they have to do. For example, if you're in a country that doesn't do L's, then your tongue doesn't know how to do L because it hasn't done reserve that part of your brain as computing power. So I think that leads to a larger picture of, we usually use technology. We think of technology as just being a further step in what we're already doing. A phone is just like a phone call. An email is like a letter. But we use phones for things that have nothing to do with what we talked about before. And certainly in emails, the way we use them to track and respond and sort and collect data, the way emails and mails use, and certainly social media. We're using social media for things that we never even thought that they would be used for. So now if we talk about duplicating a brain and add in not only the way our brains think, because we can now duplicate our neural networks onto hardware and software. In fact, using those for cleaning robots right now. For the first time, you can duplicate the scale of the human neural network. But again, you could add things to take that way beyond what we're thinking now. And I think while we have to look at the use of cognitive science, what AGI can do based on what we know, we also have to be prepared for the fact that it's going to be used for things that we have no clue about. And we won't till we get there. So we just have to be prepared to be able to adjust to what cognitive science and AGI really could do. So hope that viewpoint was helpful.
Thank you. Now I request Mr. Donald.
Well, I think it's kind of I don't know, a wild exaggeration to say that we're duplicating our neural networks onto computer hardware, because what we're doing is not really close, because we really don't really understand what's going on in our brain. I mean, just now we're starting to understand, for instance, how the glial cells and other cells operate inside of our brain to work within memory systems and stuff like that. We're slowly but surely we're finding out there's whole cells and cellular structures that are working inside of our brains that we had no idea were even doing anything literally a month ago. And so, well, or 2 months ago. And so we really don't even have a clue how our brain works right now at all. So it's not really possible for us to be able to duplicate it since we don't know how it works.
Yeah, and
So
I think I agree with you. All I was saying is that mindset that we go, oh, we'll just copy it, and my point was exactly that. We don't know what's going on. And
right.
I was saying, in an effort to do that, we were able to copy the capacity of human networks.
So yeah, okay, good. So what I'm saying is that really all that we've developed are, and so in what you're saying, I do agree with, is that what we that in a sense a computer is just an incredibly amazing pocket calculator. I mean, really, it does the way that it works with central processors and memory cells, and the way that it actually works when you get internally, the way that it works is not a whole heck of a lot different than your pocket calculator, than a pocket calculator. It's not incredibly different, but the way that we manage to extend it, is just absolutely incredible. So I agree with you that what we're able to do with these things are amazing, and so what we're going to be able to do with the very, 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 very rough copy of a portion of what our brain does, what we're doing with the things that we call that are an analogy to learning, which we call deep learning and things like that are an analogy to a portion of what we do, what we call learning. I mean, there's metal that we call learning. That metal learns because by repeated things it behaves differently, but we wouldn't call metal learning in any sense that it's like a human being learns or a cat learns. It's just an analogy to what we consider learning. And so when computers are doing computer learning, it's an analogy to what human beings do. It's not anything close to what human beings or even a cat, or it's closer to maybe what a worm does. And so we get the ELIZA effect, and basically we anthropomorphize things, and we say to ourselves, wow, this is really we project and make it seem that it's doing something that's human-like, just because we historically, human beings have projected human-like qualities on storms and hurricanes and hurricanes and wind and the sun and all kinds of things throughout our history. We've always done that, and so it's really nothing different than we've always done. And so we have to be really, really careful about that it's not really learning in any sense that's like what human beings are doing, and the neural networks are not really anything like human brains, or even cat brains, or even rat brains, or even anything, probably even cockroach brains. And so we have to. So when we're talking about cognition, the most important thing is you have to realize that living creatures are in the business of living. And so everything that they do is about living, eating, mating, fighting, staying alive, doing what it is that they need to do to be able to stay alive. And all of their senses and everything that they've developed, everything that's about them is to be able to stay in the business of living. And all of us creatures have developed this thing where we work together with other creatures, so that we work together with each other, so that we help each other in the business of us all living. And so we've developed communication systems that we have within each other, so that we communicate with each other, so that and work together so that we can all live. Ants do it, cockroaches do it, and human beings do it in an incredibly sophisticated way. And one of the parts of the way that we do it is we call language. And language isn't just a matter of words that that are on a piece of paper that we can guess, or on a computer storage file that we can guess, and make statistical probability about what word is going to be in a particular place. That's not what language is about. Language is something that is tied to our senses, and it's tied to the necessity that we have of the business that we have of staying alive and working together with each other, so that we can communicate with each other in the business of being able to stay alive and thrive. And that's what cognition is. Cognition is the way that we use our sensory information to be able to stay alive. And this kind of simplest sensory information is visual information, because we've kind of known about how that works all the way since the 19th century, because when it comes into your eye, it has to map directly to the cells in your eye to be able to. The way that it works is because it comes into your eye and it goes into your retina, and it stimulates certain nerves in your retina, and then the nerves have to go back to your brain, and then they stimulate certain parts of your brain. So we've been able to kind of trace how that works. And so we've been able to do more in that particular system than any other system. But we are clueless about how one of our most important senses work, which is touch. And we're not completely clueless, but we know not that much about it. It's extremely complicated, and that actually is quite a few senses. So hot and cold, sharp and dull, and all those. There's quite a few senses that we have that we lump together as one sense is touch. And all of those things add together to be cognition. And so in order to have artificial general intelligence, somehow we would have to have a computer that would be able to take all of those things together and use all of those things together to be able to use them for a purpose of some sort of thing, to do something, to have desires, and we think that logic is something that's like outside of ourselves. Like logic is something that a computer can do, and a computer can do better than human. But logic isn't. Logic is emotion. Logic, you can't make a logical decision without emotion, because ultimately you have to have a feeling that you're right. You have to decide. You have to feel that you have the correct answer. And so, how are we going to program into a computer? How is a computer going to have a feeling that it's right, unless there's some sort of a sense of the computer that the computer knows that within its own life, in its own context, for what it wants to do for its purpose, that it's meaningful to it to have that it's going to have some sort of value in its life and its purpose for it to be meaningful and right. We don't have a clue how any of those things work, and we don't have a clue about how. And we wave our arms and say, oh yeah, well, we make all these computer circuits and the computer will just develop this. It'll just happen. But that's ludicrous. I mean, that's ludicrous. We have no idea how our own brains work, and we're so far from that happening that all this fear of artificial general intelligence is typical Elon Musk stuff. Just like he's destroying Twitter. The head of NASA said that they were very, very happy to know that Elon Musk didn't have anything to do with SpaceX. So there's no relationship between cognitive science and artificial general intelligence in truth, really.
Mhm. Thank you. Mr. Ching.
Yeah, I take a completely different view from Don. Hi, Don.
Hi. I know you got your fuzzy logic thing.
Yeah, but you see, pole science has a complete roadmap for AI based on cognitive science. First, machine replaces animal, which replaces human in the previous historically. Then the computer starts to replace the brain. But deep learning adds perception to the arithmetic and logic unit in computer. So now the machine can see, can visualize the environment. But the software today is partially automated. So the basic thing is the software need to become complete automated. Okay. We can create an electronic brain based on the complete automated software. I have a patent on a complete automated and self-generating software system. Okay, the software system will self-generate itself into a neural network of unlimited cells. There is in the neural network, in the complete automated cell, in generate this neural network, there is a external common file. Another way, you have one cell, another cell, the first cell generates the second cell, but it has to go through an external common file. Okay, so far I can do is just to rename every newly regenerated software cell. We can generate unlimited number of software cells until the disk is full. Okay, so far I can only change the names of all these generated software cells. Okay, so basically the problem for cognitive scientists who try to design AI is to design the external common files to do function they want. So after we have the electronic brain, the electronic brain will be used to develop and control a self-manufactured general purpose robot. Okay, with the ability of touch, or the robot must be able to safely come into contact with the environment. For example, today's self-driving car, they try to avoid contact. Okay, the difficult problem is the contact problem. It's a 300 years problem. Nobody Isaac Newton, Robert Hooke, Henry Hertz couldn't solve it. These three geniuses, they couldn't solve it. And the pole science to solve it. The reason they involve 25 variables. It's a problem involve two objects at the two ends of a string. When you move one end, then you see how the other end moves. Okay, this requires thinking 5 variables on one end and 5 variables on the other. 5 times 5 equals 25. Okay, today's scientists, the best scientists, they have Nobel Prize. They have to think the old scientific problem, new scientific problem, so they can think maybe 10 variables. So far, only 2 people can think this 25 variable problem. The other person is Dai Wu. He's the Chinese father of physics. And also, I think, by reading his book, Richard Feynman might be able to think physically this 25 variable problem. So human race, Don is right. The human race today, they cannot get past 25. They cannot pass 10. Okay. Some people in economics during the Great Depression, the best thinkers went into economics, and those economists, they can think up to 30, 40 variables. They are. I think they are far more intelligent than the physicists. Okay, unfortunately, they didn't really completely solve any problem in social science. So today, anytime where there is a financial crisis, all the economy disappear. Okay, afterwards, then they come back. They say, we predict. I know that because every time there's a financial, I was working with Federal Reserve. Okay. And Alan Greenspan, Bernanke, even Janet Yellen knows me. Right now, I'm working with the Powell. And I think the first time we had the savings loan crisis, all the savings and loan closed. The industry just bankrupt. The second subprime war, actually, this Milton Friedman, myself, and the Bernanke, we all agree on quantitative easing, and I sent in three proposals to they published my 4 proposals, 3 proposals, and altogether they published 6. They received 100, and I have 3 proposals. They published my proposal, U.S. Treasury, okay, which advocate quantitative easing. So quantitative easing has saved the subprime war. We didn't get into another greater depression. Okay, today they want to go back to the gold standard. Okay, that would take away the ability of quantitative easing, and that would take away the ability of printing money. This will be a disaster. Okay, if you really use gold to back up the currency, human beings should be allowed to print money in time of crisis or in time of runaway inflation. Actually, runaway inflation is caused by printing money. Okay, so there's a contradiction in saving, but people use that, Why did they get into inflation? Because the runaway inflation, because they print too much money. They try to save the economy. All this government employees, they need money. They need salaries to survive, but only survive temporarily. On the other hand, the economy collapsed. Okay, Argentina, Brazil is following. So the world is entering into runaway inflation. On the other hand, there's countries which try to control their inflation, which make their other country inflation even worse. So United States is in the middle of it all. So the gold standard cannot be used until we invent an international currency. You see, I have invented integer gold, and now I'm working very, very hard on this. integer code. I have invented universal permanent money. Okay, so money must have the correct money must have two characteristics. One is it must be permanent. The second is it must be universal. So gold is the only example today. But I suggest that you can use a byproduct of complete automated software, universal permanent number which can be remembered by the universal permanence by the software. Okay, and that universal permanent number should be able to have the quantity have the characteristic of permanent and universal, so it should be able to use as international currency. Domestic people can use their currency to save their crisis. But once you print too much money, once you have inflation, you must revalue your currency. But today you revalue your currency based on the dollar. So every country can revalue their currency except the United States, because they cannot revalue again their own currency. Okay, so the United States must get out of being the standard of international standard currency. It must allow something else to replace it. Many people now start to suggest this gold standard. Economists think this is, they're crazy. Go back to gold standard. They're right. Economists are right. Okay. Unfortunately, people say there's no other way to control the printing of money. Okay, taking away printing money, we're in disaster. So there is this contradiction that the economy they are really into something. Okay, again, that is the application of the complete automated software. Also, Don mentioned something. We need to evaluate what we want to create. You see, also Don reject to Elon Musk, which is, I think this is some point of debate. Okay, today I know the most intelligent people in the world. I also know the most richest people in the world. Okay, this in the public media, you listen to all these billionaires, but the one I know is the one who owns the in-ground gold. He's a trillionaire. Okay, nobody knows his name. And also Elon Musk makes a point that is proven by actual fact, because I know many intelligent people. Okay, the most intelligent people in the world, possibly. Okay, at least half of them. One of them is he has been Lionel Mason. Okay, his name. Okay, he has been when he was young, he was so smart. He was the number one historical, the best score in Lehman Brothers entrance test. When he was young, he knows how to break computer codes. When he was young, he entered into banks in Africa. Okay, and he said he just want to walk around, look around. He has no intention to steal money or something. But anyway, British government still asking what you want. You either we jail you or we electric shock you. Okay, so they put the electro shocking, and I saw his face. It was scarred, cut. This mathematician. He's so smart. He refused to receive awards. Okay, these people, if they use their intelligence for bad, they can cause problems. Even they don't even know it. Okay. Today's robot are not really causing problems. Okay. Today's drones, they can really replace nuclear weapons. They can go around, kill any they want. Okay. And they are actually helping stopping wars. instead of starting them. Okay, so this is what's going on there. In conclusion, okay, this point is I'm not accusing being contradictory to Don. Actually, I'm just adding into the future, which nobody knows. So there's nothing to compete. In the future, the robot will be developed into the human. And the software, complete autonomous software will be developed into DNA. Okay, so basically we're in the process of self-creation. Okay, I have a website, self.creation.org, O-R-G, self-creation.org. And in that website, I argue against David Hume. Okay, David Hume said regardless how complex is reality, it does not prove that we come from evolution. Does not prove we come from whatever. Yeah, evolution. Not evolution, not from design. Actually, they're against design, intelligent design. Okay. My argument was that you do not look into the past, you look into the future. Okay. The future says we're going to self-creating ourselves. Okay, when our self-creation, what was our self-creation consider us? We become the creator, we become God. Okay. So basically, this is the process the universe continues. And Don's quite right that the universe is so, Earth is so tiny compared to the whole universe. First, we cannot claim that we know many things in the universe or above DNA. Okay, this is just way too. The scientists are just babies, among the intellect in the universe. So we're far from making such a claim. But anyway, I outlined the roadmap. And I think young people, if they want to, they can follow pole science, and we have it all done. And the really intelligent one can come and think about the common external file. That is the key. Okay, when you self-generate, you have to go through a common external file. This file so far can only change the name of the new cells. And if they can make it to other things, that would be great. That would go into the neural network. Obviously, with unlimited software, can obviously make a deep learning much faster. Okay, so this is just a roadmap. Yeah, I think if you give me time to say the conclusion, I would say something very supportive of Don's conclusion about philosophy. Basically, historically, the thinkers, the logician, the mathematician, and the philosophers, they started science. Okay, not scientists. Then Rene Descartes became the father of science, and after they invented science, immediately it's taken over by Immanuel Kant, who think we should consider infinity. Okay, scientists, they do not consider infinity. They just consider finite, control the volume, finite control the volume to study finite problems. Okay, so they're very far. They don't understand what is social science. I think the life science are the most difficult to communicate because they don't understand foundation of life science. Life is characterized by complete automation. Okay, what are they talking about? Nature never create anything that cannot last permanently. All the human creation are temporary. So what they are talking about, this is very far. But Elon Musk is not too bad. He sees something and he speaks the truth. Another person who speaks truth is my two friends, Paul Feyerabend, who passed away, and there's another guy, John Horgan, Horgan. He speaks the truth, and now Paul science seems to be verify his conclusions. He wrote a book called The End of Science. Also, he initially, before that, he wrote the death of mathematics. I'm in the process of discrediting both science and mathematics. So I will support it. Okay, if I have chance, I will say more about the philosophy, behind all this. And then basically, I would say the engineers, they just use the equations scientists give to them and plug in their own data, and they think that is right. Okay, they treat the science as if it's a religion. The equations are the religious doctrines. So this is terrible. Okay, so the engineers are not going to finally solve all this problem that we're talking about, cognitive science or AI. And it has to come back to the philosophers. Okay, that's it. Yeah, thanks.
Mhm. Thank you. Now I request Mr. David Smith.
Sharif, has been very good discussion so far. I really enjoy the comments which are being made in the comment section from Virginia and Brazil. She is so right that one of the key elements when you look at artificial intelligence, particularly large scale artificial intelligence with AGI, but also how the cognitive pieces, cognitive science of AGI can come together, is looking at the large language models. And large language models are really the key for any of the large scale AI systems, particularly the cognitive ones, the autonomous uh, GPT, which was just released, the Chat GPT, and others. Uh, at my companies, we've been using AGI uh, since version 2, which they just released version 4 and working towards version 5 now. And it has improved so much. But as Virginia mentions here, it's still quite a ways away from artificial general intelligence or AGI. The, the challenge you have, and this is where I disagree a little bit with what Donald said, and really go back and and would like to reinstate what I had said before, is that once you begin to look at cognitive sciences within artificial intelligence, it's really the study of the mind and its processes. A cognitive science in artificial intelligence is not necessarily mimicking the human brain in a neurological standpoint. It's really looking at the study of the mind and its processes, such as how do you get attention? How do you do perception? How do you remember things? How do I make decisions? How do you do metacognition? What is thinking about thinking, for example? What is languages? What is the subconscious processes that are needed there? And that is where the cognitive sciences and the cognitive neuroscience and the cognitive psychology and all of these come together. You know, you begin to see the pieces that work there. And yes, you know, the brain is identified in multiple parts, not just the classic brain as we look at. And some of them, like the brain stem, are more closely connected to where artificial intelligence is today with the autonomous. And you see that working in there. But so how does it play here? Now, the first is let's look at how artificial intelligence is looking at memory, and you know, in us is all memory the same, and the brain is all memory the same, and artificial intelligence, particularly as it goes towards AGI, is all memory the same. And how do those pieces work together? And well, we know we are not using true neuroscience today as we look at the brain, as we look at artificial intelligence. Even though we have things like Eric mentioned earlier with some of our deep neural networks, we have different types of looking at it. Eric brought a very good systems view to how artificial general intelligence and cognitive processing and cognitive scale can be applied in there. But I do believe there is a lot we can learn here, just like going back to some of my early days in artificial intelligence with Doug Lynette, with his common sense experiments with artificial intelligence, and how he's built a company over the last 30 years built around selling common sense artificial intelligence to very large corporations and to the government. That concept of cognitive uh, science, the concept of how do we think, the concept of uh, common sense has to play if we're going to artificial general intelligence. These large language models, which we talked about last week, Sharif, in one of your programs, these large language models are the key for doing this. But for large language models to be successful, we have to do it in every language. We have to do it in every culture. We have to do these large language models to look at the nuances. For example, a large language model in the United States looking at health, the languages you use in the New England part of the United States versus what you use in California versus what you use in Texas versus what you use in Montana and other places, there are significant differences in what would constitute part of that LMS if you look at training these artificial intelligence systems that can begin to approach AGI. But for AGI, it has to become self-learning, self-discovery, self-expanding to meet the definitions of AGI. And you're not going to do that without additional input from cognitive sciences that make sense of all of these differences. And particularly when you look at the whole area of large language models as it's becoming to play today. Those large language models are complete with biases. They're complete with regionalism. They are full of partial definitions. A good example in the area of healthcare, the one word provider in the United States has over a dozen different meanings. So how does a large language model deal with things like that? Those are what we have to come to grasp with as we begin to work towards AGI. And I know I got a little too technical there, but this is really the challenges of where we have to work to begin to even get down the road to AGI. Eric, I think it might be you.
Yeah, I was about to go. Well, first of all, thank you to Virginia for the excellent comments in that. I agree with David. They're excellent. And I think David and Donald both made my points, what I was trying to say, better than I did. But kind of summing up, the big thing is that the brain is incredibly complex by itself. And on top of that, cognition is very complex. And it's really a bunch of very complex processes that, as Donald mentioned, we don't totally understand. It comes from our sensory inputs and what we do with it, and different parts of the brain do different things and pass it, and our brain expands and changes based on, like Donald said, what we need to live. So part of our brain gets focused on certain things, and that changes over time. So it's incredibly complex. My one of the points I was making is just that often part of what we do tends to be like, well, we'll just start with what we have and think in those terms. And that was my point, that people have tried to do that, tried to get the complexity of brains and duplicate those processes. And it's had some value of doing that. But I think the point that both David and Donald made is, our artificial brains, our computer networking systems aren't our brains, and they can do things differently. I mean, there are things that we can add that our brains don't do. And so that brings, I think, back to Donald's point is, yeah, but think what they can teach us about us by looking at how it's the same and different and being able to compare things. We can begin to understand these complex processes in our brain better. So I think AGI can teach us a lot about human cognition. But I don't think that that the AGI isn't ever going to be just exactly another person because it's a different animal. And I think the big thing coming from that is we don't know where this will go. Some things we can predict, like David said, some things have been on a path, and you said the same thing. There's this path that we know goes, there's this path that's been following. But like every other path we've done with every other technology, from everything to social media, at some point it goes places and is used for things we didn't even think of when the technology evolved. So I think the world ahead is going to be different in some ways we can predict, and different in a lot of ways that we can't predict. So I think one of the key values we have is how do we constantly evaluate and deal with that change, as opposed to saying, oh, we have to make a 5-year plan or 20-year plan like we used to do, to say, this is what's going to happen. I think we need a plan to figure out how to constantly be resilient and adapt to what's going on, and even those methods, because we can add AI to help us deal with the changes and understand the changes that we will be going as people and as a world with AI. So yeah, I think that's the real key, is to realize that some things we know, some things we can't know. Brains and AI aren't exactly the same, but I think we can learn a lot about each one, both by comparing them. With that, I guess I'll turn that back over to Donald, who probably get my points and say it even better than I do.
Thank you, Mr. Donald. Mr. Donald, can you unmute yourself? Mr. Donald, can you? Yeah.
I really agree with Eric that these are powerful tools, and we don't really know where they're going to go. The Washington Post did some fact checking from Bing, which is Chat GTP, and it was fairly good, but it wasn't anywhere near perfect. And it's pretty funny. The Economist said it in a very good way. It said humorously that it was like an economist because it had perfect confidence and absolute certainty and was wrong. I thought that was very, very funny. I think it's interesting because David and I use different terminology. And I will point out that I will mention that, starting in the late 70s, my degree was in linguistics, and I've been studying cognitive science. Basically, cognitive science came out of linguistics. It was Noam Chomsky was the person who's attributed with basically inventing it. And so I've had my toe in the door, graduate work and so on like that all the way since then. So that's a long time. And in cognitive science, we don't really talk about minds exactly. We talk about cognition, and so we kind of think of minds as an explanation and not a cause of anything. It's like, why did that person do something? Well, they have a mind, and it's not something that we really study particularly. And so it's just, but that doesn't really affect anything. I agree with what David is saying. Basically, it's just a just a minor terminological nit, and it's really point out to be very, very clear that Chat GTP and large language models are not in any way doing anything resembling cognition. They're just looking at large numbers of texts, and just they leave out words, and then they just guess statistically what word should go there, and they also, what they do is they give features to words. So they say, well, this word is a noun, it's a verb. You can ask Chat GTP how it works, and it will give you, and the more questions you ask it, it can get into quite a bit of detail on how it works. And it's quite interesting. And so it just looks at the relationship to other words in the text to try and find out its relationships to other words is what it considers to be meaning. And so there's nothing like what we would consider to be meaning, which is the effect. And so when we talk about culture in the context of Chat GTP or any of the other large language models, it doesn't have any relationship to what we mean when we're talking about culture. And so when we talk about saying that a word has an X number of meanings, in Chat GTP or something else like that, we're talking about looking it up in a dictionary perhaps, or something like that. But that doesn't have any relationship to what meaning is in humans or in language. In language, words pretty much have different meanings every time they're used. And the meaning is something that we negotiate and develop within the context of the ongoing communication situation that's happening right now with what we're doing. And the words common sense are the sense that's common to the particular social environment that you're in right now. And so what's the common sense for you and the people that you're with right now is going to be different than the common sense with you or different groups of people in different kinds of places. So there is no real common sense. And there's a wonderful book about that called Everything is Obvious Once You Know the Answer by Duncan Watts, who we both have the same mentor, a guy named Harrison White. And Duncan Watts is a professor at Columbia. And he was very helpful to me. And he's a very bright guy. And so anyway, what I'm saying is, I want to say is that I think it's sad that computer scientists don't really study and look into cognitive science very much. And they don't really know very much about it, mostly. And so they think that they're doing things that they aren't actually doing. So people at Microsoft have said things like they think computers are starting to become sentient, which is, some of these large language models and things like that. And that's ludicrous. And I just, it's kind of sad that they say that, and they're saying stuff like, oh, well, we're right at the cusp of, the Terminator thing where all the computers are going to get hooked together and suddenly they're going to, become intelligent and they're going to turn on us. And, we're right at the cusp of suddenly, the computers are going to just suddenly become artificial general intelligence, and they're going to where they're going to take over the world and things like that, and that's absolutely ludicrous. And that's why bragged on Elon Musk, because he's people some people respect him, and he's going down that path. And so I want to reassure people that we're a long, long way from that. And I think Eric, pointed that out. What he was saying was clear. But on the other hand, I think what Eric said is really, really, really important, because some of the things that are happening with the large language models is people are actually using them to write articles for magazines, and people are writing their term papers using large language models, and people are blogging asking ChatGPT to write their blog entries. And I mean, all this stuff is going on, and it's just, that this is just the hint of what things are going to be being used with these large language models. We don't even know all the cool things that are going to be happening and how they're going to change how we live our lives. And we don't need to have artificial general intelligence for that to happen. I mean, all the ways that it's going to affect and change our lives are staggering. And I think that when we look at this technology, it's better to keep our eye on the ball than to spend time thinking about fantastical things that are not anywhere close to being realistic. And that's what I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you.
Always wonderful to be on the panel with such interesting people. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. What's your concluding?
Okay, well, I think in today's money-oriented society, just like in the Great Depression, people, go to economics. Today, people go for money. So Elon Musk should be a thinker of of knowledge, not for money. You see. So you cannot totally blame him. He didn't have the knowledge, the time to spend on knowledge. You see, that there should be a complete new foundation for AGI, just like Don pointed out. That is really good starting point to criticize, today's people who are working on this AIG. You see, so the example is when a baby is born, it has twice the brain cell as an adult, and the way brain cells are retained is based on trophic factor. Okay, unfortunately, different part of the brain require different type of trophic factor. So, in the future, if we want the brain to be smart, we can just feed it more trophic factors. Okay, I know this because I'm following research in the University of California, San Diego, and the Stanford University. They're doing this. Okay. They know how to keep a premature baby alive by feeding them trophic factor. So these are top secret because they are human experiments. But I know this because I have adopted some baby preemies, and I know what they do, what they try. They feed a different type of traffic, and the baby come out to have different type of intelligence. So let's go back to the basic.
You muted yourself. You need to unmute.
Mr. Ching, can you unmute yourself?
Okay, let me repeat this. What we need is a new foundation for AIG. Okay, like Don pointed out. Okay, people criticize AGI have this idea. So when I say that a baby is born. I was saying a baby is born with twice the brain cells than adult, and the way to retain the brain cell is by feeding them trophy factors. Okay, but to retain every part of the brain needs a different type of trophy factor. So it's a difficult thing. And I know this because I follow University of California, San Diego, and also Stanford University. They're doing this research on humans. It's a secret research. Okay, they can make a brain more more intellectual, or they can make a baby more emotional by feeding them different types of 12 factors. Okay, I know this because I know two adopted kids, preemies, who are 4 months premature. Okay, and they can bring those baby back to normal. Okay, so let's try to describe the new foundation for AGI. 2,000 years ago, philosophers started the process towards science. Okay, science today look for exact constants of nature with the scientific method based on empirical verification. Pole science deals with social and life sciences. Pole science contradict both exact data and also empirical verification, because in social science all data are fuzzy, not exact. So there is a direct contradiction. Also, in social and life science, we have to make a decision based on the expected future to infinity. So it's non-empirical verifiable, because all this data, infinite data, cannot be collected. You got to do it in your mind, like Kant said. You got to, there's things in your mind, there's things in reality. Okay, there are two types of things you have to consider. And David Hilbert, the top mathematician in the 18th century, endorsed the 19th century, endorsed the Kant. Okay, law of Sade proposed fuzzy logic. Actually, he popularized fuzzy logic. He put fuzzy logic on the map. Okay, and he was one of my mentors. Okay, we worked very closely for 10 years, meeting almost twice a week. Now I'm the heir to fuzzy logic, law of Sade. You see, so engineers take what scientists give to them and not. They need thinkers to provide them with the correct foundation for AGI. So Don is right. And today's engineer, they're not getting anywhere with this. They cannot solve the problem of touch. They cannot solve the problem of computer automation. Computer automation software is a very difficult problem to solve. It involves 3 innovations simultaneously. And finally, the world needs thinkers who are, today the thinkers are thinking about money, because we live in a money-oriented society, which look for short-term monetary gains. What we need to do is look for long-term monetary as well as non-monetary socially benefit returns. So that is my conclusion. It's all stuck, down. We're in a money-oriented society, so people think
Thank
about
you.
money. Okay, that's it. Yeah, thanks.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Ivan, for joining today's session. Thank you. Bye-bye and take care.
Okay, bye.
কোনটা করবো?